From 1980 to 2010, the United States launched 135 manned missions into space. Since then, they have only launched 3. Space exploration was a very important part of our country's history and currently is not that prominent. In the future, as the population increases, food and water will become more scarce and the Earth will not be able to sustain the entire human population. We might have to look out to space to solve our future problems. I chose to research and discuss this topic because of the prominence of the issue currently. We have the administration announcing Space Force, and then we also have private companies launching their own rockets into space for missions. I will begin by informing you a little bit about the history of space and exploration, and then go into more of how it's currently working, and then in the future, what I am going to infer will come about. Let's begin in the 1960s, when the United States and the Soviet Union began the space race. It started in 1961 when the Soviet Union launched Yuri Gagarin into space, and then followed by the United States and NASA starting the Mercury program and launching men such as Buzz Aldrin and Alan Shepard, which are on your visual aids located here and here, into space on the first rocket you see in that visual aid, the Mercury. We then followed that up by racing Russia to the moon, and we accomplished that feat in 1969 when Neil Armstrong stepped foot onto the face of the moon. NASA stands for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration Program. It is a branch of the United States government that is run through the executive branch, and it handles aeronautic research along with the civilian space program here in the United States. It was founded in 1958 under Dwight D. Eisenhower, and it was very new at that time, and the budget was only 0.1% of the federal budget. But then in 1966, the budget was increased to 4.4%. That was the peak for the budget, and since then it has decreased and currently sits at 0.7%. They used that budget for very good things in the 60s. Putting men on the moon was a very important thing, and it was in a time where the Communist Party was very frightening to many Americans, so being able to beat them up to the moon was a very large victory. But public opinion did waver in the 60s and 70s when the Apollo crashes started happening and the programs weren't being as successful, and they thought we could spend our money on other things such as the Vietnam War. Although space exploration was a very important part of our past, it has currently dropped off. Not as many astronauts are going up into space. It is more unmanned missions put on not by NASA but private companies such as SpaceX and Orbital Space Corporation. And they are just doing that for research and possible business reasons, not very exploration. NASA has moved away from those manned missions because of their budget. They just cannot afford to keep putting men into space. The most recent space launch was June 6th of this year, and it was 3 Russian astronauts into space, so NASA was not even involved in that. People are very split nowadays. They either think it's a boondoggle that is not worth us putting money and time into, or they think that, yeah, it might be the future. And politicians are the same way. Republicans believe we should focus on Earth, while Democrats want to increase funding and put more into the space exploration program. The current opinion is very split, and it might soon shift as we look towards the Earth's future problems. That includes the population increase, as I mentioned before. We might have to leave the planet. That might be the solution to that problem, is just spreading out the population of humans so that they are better equipped to survive in other places. There are really 2 opinions for the future: either put money into NASA or to let just private corporations run the space programs and do what they can with the money that they have. And that would keep people happy, because then it would just boost the economy, because people would have to pay to go into space, and then the government would not be wasting their money with this. So as space becomes more and more apparent as a solution for the problems that we might face, we can see that it has changed greatly from the past when it was such an important part to now where it is not thought of as a viable situation to go into space, but we could very much see that as a solution for future problems.